Okay, this is part two of the tutorial on how to write up your findings. And in this tutorial, I'm going to focus on how to do the analysis of your results. Now, the first thing that you should do is if you have not completed all of your data presentation, then or most of it at least, then I would stop at this point. Because I don't think it's possible to really write a good analysis until you've done the data presentation for all of your 3 research questions. And that's going to become more apparent in a second why that's quite important. Now, there is kind of one exception to that. You might, as you write your results, suddenly occur to you that maybe an annotated photograph might help you illustrate something, and you want to therefore include that. Or when you may be looking at a map and you've noticed an area of the map where the result was not what you expected, and you've got some photographs of that area, then you might want to put an annotated picture there. Or you might be drawing some conclusions about there being a relationship between a couple of pieces of information or a couple of pieces of data that you've gathered. And you suddenly occurs to you that maybe you want to do a statistical test to mathematically prove whether this relationship exists. So it's likely that new data presentation opportunities will occur to you as you work your way through this. But I would strongly recommend that you complete the most of the key bits of data presentation in advance of this step. Second thing is, this is the most important section of the entire project. Carries 12 marks, which is more than any other section carries. So pay attention to all of the points I make. And there are 2 very important key points that I want to see you very clearly signposting all of the way through your analysis. And what I mean by signposting is where you are explicit about drawing my attention to your analysis. Okay, and I'll tell you what that is in a second. So what is analysis at advanced higher? It's a bit different from higher. Analysis at higher was where you talked about your results and you would have described your results. You would have talked about a pattern. In this case, at higher, you'll have done an investigation on a river. So let's just say you'll have discussed the pattern of changing discharge down the river, and you will have identified a number of key locations where the discharge did something you didn't expect it to do. And then you will have offered evidence and explanations for that. And you might have had some photographs to support those conclusions that you made, as well as other bits of evidence like the geology, for example, that might have influenced the behavior of the river. And in some extent, this analysis at advanced higher isn't that different. That the first step is you will have your research question. You'll have a nice piece of data presentation using some complex techniques. That could be a graph, a nice graph. It could be a map. It could be a combination of a graph and a map. There might be a couple of annotated photos to go with it, and you might have even done a statistical test to prove something. Now you're analyzing it. You're actually telling me the story of what do your results show. Now let's just bear in mind that you have a research question, and the reason for creating a map or a graph is because you're hoping that it helps you answer that question. So let's, for example, say you're looking to see if there is a variation in results between 2 different locations, and you've got a pie chart to show the 2 locations, and that you're very clearly seeing that the results for location 1, as shown by the pie chart, are very different from location 2. So the graph shows me that. So what you now need to do is tell me the story of the graph. So draw my attention to the fact that the graph shows that there is a difference. Give me the evidence from your piece of data presentation that supports there being a difference in the 2 graphs. Or if the 2 graphs are the same, then you should make that apparent to me. And obviously, anything you write should always be in the context of your research question, because remember, it is a question, so it's something you're aiming to answer. And therefore, your data presentation should be allowing you to some extent to answer it. Whether that is answering in a positive or in a negative way, it doesn't really matter, but you should be drawing my attention to what am I looking at. So use data, use information from your graphs, but don't spend too long on the descriptive of your results. And a lot of students make that first big mistake. They write paragraphs and paragraphs analyzing the data and what it shows. You want to give me a summary, an overall view of what does this piece of data presentation show, and where are the key exceptions or the key things that you want me to look at when I look at the graph or the map. You might even want to put some arrows or some annotations onto your graphs or your maps or your photos to draw my attention to the key things that you're then going to discuss. Okay, so now here comes the main bit, and this is where you're going to want to make some notes. You're going to want to, as often as you can, achieve this bullet point here. You're going to want to draw a link or relationship between the piece of data that you're describing and explaining and another piece of data that you're presenting somewhere else in your project. So maybe another research question where you've got, so for example, one research question you're looking at soil moisture and another research question you're looking at soil depth, and you're analyzing them as separate research questions and maybe on a slope, for example. But actually, there would probably be a link between the depth of soil in different locations and the amount of moisture in the soil. And if you notice there was a link between that or a relationship, then you would be wanting to actually signpost it to me that these two graphs that you've got are linked and you want to actually draw my attention to that. You might actually have them on the same piece of data presentation. So there might be two bits of data you're presenting using the same mapping or graphing technique, and you want to make it obvious that there is a link behind what I'm seeing. You might have a photograph that you've annotated and you want to link that to your graph or your map. And when you make those links, make them obvious. Actually point out to me that there is a link between figure 6, which shows this, and figure 7, which shows that, and tell me what that link is. And then you obviously want to explain that link or that relationship. Okay, the more often you do that, the more likely you are going to hit the 11 or 12 marks. And you'll notice in the 11, 12 mark category, it says you need to make clear and explicit explanations for those links. Okay. Now, those links don't necessarily have to be between different bits of data. They could be between your data and the theories that you've established in your background research. Now, when I was teaching you how to do a background research, I was making and stressing a key thing about your background research, which is that you're going to be relying on what you set up in your background research when you write your findings. So now is when any work or good work that you've done in your background research has to come back out again. So if you had a theory or an idea that you'd explored in your background research, and now your results are supporting that theory or supporting those findings that you set up in your background research, then you want to be very explicit in making that link. So for example, if we think back to higher geography, Bradshaw's model was a theory which you established in the background research section of your higher project. Then when you were writing up your findings, you were telling me whether discharge was increasing or decreasing. And then you were linking back your findings to the actual theory of Bradshaw's model and whether Bradshaw was accurate or not. So you want to be doing a similar thing. Now, it might not be a theory. It depends what your research question is and whether you found any theories. It might be somebody's study, a bit of data you came across in somebody else's work. Or any ideas that you have presented in your background research, you want to now bring back out and compare those ideas to your actual pieces of data presentation. So that's a second way that you can create these links. In this case, instead of a link, you'd be looking at the similarity between your results and the data sets and theories from other people's work, or maybe contradictions where your results are different from other people's work or other people's theories. Okay. Final way you can be really clear with these relationships is where you draw attention or my attention explicitly to any relationships or links between your results and the much bigger picture of what's maybe going on in the country or in the world in general. And obviously yours is just a small little study with a very specific context, but that doesn't mean you can't then link it into a much bigger picture. And many of you will be doing projects which are, whilst you're only investigating a very small aspect, there might be some much more significant, wider context which your project fits into, and it's worthwhile drawing links and relationships there. Okay. What you also want to do is you want to start with this and finish with this in each of your research questions. You want to actually reflect on the question. If you created a hypothesis back when you set up your research questions, you must reflect back on that hypothesis and tell me what's your conclusion in regards to the hypothesis. Is it accurate or not? Now, this is for some students, this is a point where they often embark on some statistics, because if your data lends itself to a statistical test, it's quite a good way of confirming whether the hypothesis you set up was accurate or not for your data. So these two key statements, and you'll notice the entire mark scheme is all about the identification of the links between the different bits of data you've gathered in your different research questions and your background research, the link between your findings and your background research. Now, you can have a little look at some examples of analysis that shows all of this. So this student, for example, has a nice piece of data presentation showing you 4 transects of in this case, the number of plant species on slopes, and they've got slopes facing different directions. And you can see there's far more plant species lower down than there is. This is the top of the slopes, and these are the bottom of the slopes. They've also put the data into bar graphs, which allow us to do a much more easy visual comparison between how the trend is changing on each transect. And then they're creating a link between these graphs, what they show, and the map, the geolocated data here. And then they're writing about those links and not just telling me about the pattern on each slope, but giving me the general pattern on all of the slopes and the exceptions. And it would have been the student would have, if they'd had a photograph of one of those exceptions to the rule, then they'd have done that. And down here you can see that the student said, overall, therefore, my data does not match the theories highlighted in my background research, which was a report by the Islamic Azad University in Iran. They discovered that. Now, that's what this bit of text is, what I would call being explicit about saying whether there is a link or not a link between your results and other people's results, or between 2 bits of data that you've gathered that are in different sections of your project. For example, research question 1 and 2. So the more often I see those explicit links, and the more likely you are to get into the higher marks. Okay. I would suggest you go and look at other people's projects that you'll find in the Google Classroom to have a look at how they've approached it. I've got some key bullet points here about what the example I've got here actually shows you, okay, in terms of how to present and then analyze data, because this example I've given is what I would have called very high order data presentation. And also, if I just go back to conclude with to some advice, you'll find this in the main how to write your project. These points here, okay? Key points when analyzing data. Any explanation analysis you give for your data has got to link back to your research question. Don't deviate from your research question. Don't get lost in overanalyzing something and forgetting that you have a question you're trying to answer, okay? And also reflect back how that then helps you achieve your central aim. And be explicit about it. Say, these results show me this about the research question. These results confirm the central point of the aim, or allow me to understand this about my aim or that. Be explicit. Tell me that. Write it. Second point, always make specific references to the data that you've presented. So quote some key bits of data. Don't overanalyze your data. Just give me the highlights of your data. Refer to specific bits that are anomalies that don't fit the general pattern, or maybe the highest result or the lowest result. You should avoid making general comments that you cannot link back to factual evidence. Okay, so you will want to say that the median result on figure 6 was this, but you can see at site 7 the data was 23.7, which was substantially different, and the reason for that was. That's the kind of way you want to be writing. The third bullet point, and I've talked a lot about this, about making the link between your different bits of data presentation in your different research questions, which is why you want to have done your data presentation all up front before doing your analysis. And finally, and the more often you do this, without a doubt, you're going to get a higher mark. You've got to make explicit links between the theory in your background research and what you're now finding in your results. Okay, and you want to be explicit in that. So you actually want to tell me what the link between your results and the theory is. Okay, so spend your time. You might want to listen to this a few times just to pick out the key results. There'll be plenty of opportunity to discuss in class as you write this, any particular problems you might be having in either the data presentation step of your findings or the actual analysis step. But good luck.